think Rabbi said we up to middle. Let's start again. Page Shin Tzaddik Gimel. Hey. So let me explain what the Rav does over here. This is, he follows the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham brings here the halachas which the Shulchan doesn't speak. The Rav, the Shulchan didn't. There are halachas that he left, left it for granted that we all know all about it. But the Magen Avraham writes it down, and the Rav brings it down. Mitzvah al kol udam le'hevoi is called echad ve'echad kigifoy. You have a mitzvah to love every person like your own body. Very interesting. That means you have a mitzvah to love everyone like you love yourself. Shneimar, every Jew. V'haftu ra'achu k'moicho. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that, if I have to give everything away. So the Rabban ala Torah explains it in a very, very simple way. The Rav brings down, let me just explain, he brings down the negative. What does he says? So luchis al kavoidoi, you have to care about his kavod. Don't hurt someone's feelings. You don't want your feelings to be hurt, don't have his feelings being hurt. He said, luchis al mamoinoi, and his money. So, big deal is get a scratch in his car. I'm in a rush, scratch his car. He says, so the Rav brings down, this is the Lashon Harasha, the negative sort of to say. Ma'adisama Allah, but you don't like to, that's an Aramaic expression, but you don't like to be done to you, le'saved lechavrich, don't do to your friend. That's a famous expression. So he talks about the negative, but the Ramban, ala Torah, says another very profound thing. You should wish for your friend whatever you wish for yourself. You want to be wealthy? Wish that all your friends should be wealthy. You want to be smart? Wish for your friends. Some people have this like this. You be the rabbi, I'll be the smart man. Let's have things, let's have our, boundaries correct. You know what I mean? You should want from him to be a rabbi, to be a Talmud Chacham, to be successful, to be good looking, whatever you want for yourself. You should really want it. And it's an incredible, powerful thing. And so he says, that's what after Achel K'meichon. One, I just want to say, in the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, and Tanya speaks about all the Tamina, said that it's not only in a negative way, don't hurt him. You should, the Rizal said, you should have this a focus. There were great Chassidim before they started davening. They would meditate for a little while. In the Siddur Rav, right in the beginning, it says that comes from the Rizal, that it's a mitzvah, that you have to really. It doesn't come easy because we are competition. We are competitive. Our competition dries up. The force of life is the competition. Anyway, so that's what this is very frightening. If you take honor of the embarrassment of your friend, that means you make sure he doesn't know. Come to me. He feels. He takes honor on that. Look at how fool he is, and takes. That's called a meschabit. He takes his kavod when a lot of people like to kick someone. There's American saying, "Kick him when he's down." The people like to make fun. This guy's going through a time. Mamish ein lechede kolam haba. It's really, really frightening. Then he says, now this is another halacha. Many, many people don't know the next halacha. This is the Rambam, the Ramban, the Orach Chaim, the Rishbam. What happens if I am annoyed at you? Most people feel I'm annoyed. Don't make it. I'm not going to say to the guy, not because it doesn't bother me. It bothers me, but I'm not going to tell him. I'm not going to call him up. The Rambam learns there's a mitzvah esa deraisa If someone hurt your feelings, tell them, I'm extremely hurt because so-and-so. If Yitaka doesn't bother you, there's no reason to call him. If you're such a level, you don't care. So the guy said something. So he said something. There are people, because we all are different sensitive. Certain people are much more sensitive. Anyone who's married know that women or you have daughters are incredibly sensitive, you know what I mean? And men are not so sensitive. But there are men who are more sensitive too. Every little thing. So if it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother you. But if it does bother you and you don't want to tell him, then you're allowed. He says, don't hate him and be quiet. Mitzvah, he's going to bring down. Mitzvah ulov lo'idi aloi meloi, to tell him, lama sisa likach lekach, shenemar, hoicheach, techiach esamisecho. The Rambam and the Ramban all learn that the mitzvah is tell your friend what's bothering you. This is great for Shalom Bayis too. Sometimes couples, they're annoyed at each other and they hold on to, especially young people. He should, especially young women. Always one of the things I taught my daughters, don't think that your husband has a Ruach HaKodesh. You know what I mean? He should know that if he loves me, he should know by now. Yeah, that sounds familiar, right? So anyways, so he's saying that there's a mitzvah, tell him what's bothering you. Mistuma means bearing a grudge, the hate. Stima doesn't mean hate, the annoyance, the grudge. So if someone, I always say over an amazing story in my shul. Many years ago, there was a guy, he tells me he hasn't spoken. Do you know I don't speak to this guy for 3 years? He says, why? He says, he made a bar mitzvah and didn't invite me. He says, I also wasn't invited. So I didn't remember. So I went over to him, He says, he that year was a tough year. He wasn't going to, spend more. So he had the bar mitzvah in Torah Semes. The children go to Torah Semes. That's a school in my neighborhood. And just for the boys and the grandparents came. So I went back to him. I says, he didn't make a bar mitzvah. No, he can't be. I says, he told me. And then he asked others. And for 3 years, this guy walked around with a grudge. He could have gone over to him. I feel hurt, slighted. He didn't invite me to bar mitzvah. I noticed he didn't want to sit down. I forgot the details. I noticed that something is that. So that's what the Rambam says. Most often, I'll tell you the truth. Most often, not always, but most often, when you are annoyed at someone, we think he got up in the morning and he said that Hashem Yichud, you know what Hashem Yichud means? And I'm going to hurt him. Most people don't pay attention. They're caught up in their own world and they maybe didn't greet him, maybe didn't say something. And so, confront him and just say, I was hurt. Yes.
I recently read Rabbi Shalom Aruch's book, The Garden of Emunah. And in that book, when he talks about the portion on Shalom Bayis specifically, he speaks about how the man should never, if he's upset about something or his wife did something, etc., he should never bring it up. And I'm just
that doesn't work. I'll tell you clearly, that doesn't work. How long are you married?
Not married, but I hope
soon.
I hope to be, and this would be an important point for me to know.
Well, anyone married for a while, it's extremely healthy to tell your wife, I don't, you know what I tell my wife? It could be on tape. You know what I tell my wife? I'm the last one on the list. And there's just no chas v'shul, but that's how you feel, the last one on the list. Yeah, but it sounds great when she hears you loud and clear. You can't argue with me. There's nothing to argue. She gets annoyed. No, you're not the last one. Well, that's how I feel. I asked you to take care of something. Looks like I'm the last thing on the list to be taken care of. But it works because you expressed yourself, she hears you, and you move on. When a person doesn't say, most people, if it's silly things, no one cares. But if it's not silly things, it builds up and it builds up. and then it's like a volcano, then it explodes. That's what the Rambam says, not that way. I heard this people quote me from the book. The Rambam, this is illusion, this is illusion of Rambam. And the Rabban al Torah says this way, the Orach Chaim Siman says, all the, what? Yeah, right. Right, also so. But you see very clearly, it's important, if you're annoyed, you tell your spouse, it works, in the Shalom Bayis it works great. And not just Shalom Bayis, any friends that you have. You say, listen, I feel slighted.
You have to say that in anger. Right, of course.
Yeah. So by Shalom Bayis, it works great when you tell her, I feel I'm the last one on the list. She can't disagree with you.
Unless it's not true.
Yeah, then she says, no, it's not true. She always says it's not true. Yeah. But we laugh, but she got the message. Anyways, so that's what he says. It's a mitzvah deraisa. So the Rambam learns, it's very interesting. The Rambam learns that's pshuta shemikra. If you are annoyed at someone, tell him what you're annoyed. Have it out with him. Don't wiggle around. Then the Rambam says the chelik of the mitzvah is you should tell. So see someone doing a sin, you should stop him. Rebuke him. That Rav Rishonim learn that that's only what the pasuk is saying. The Rambam learns that's not. The pasuk is telling you have a disagreement with someone, speak to them about it. Follow? So he says, Aroyes chaveiroi shechuta. She's friend sinning. A shehulach bederech loy toiva. He's not going on the right road. Mitzvah ulav lachziroi nemitov. You have to bring her back to elaydiyoi shechoita al nafshoi b'masa haruim. Mitzvah, if that doesn't work, nowadays I don't think that's going to work. Walk over to someone and says, you are a sinner. Today we have other ways, we carve them, bring them to... But there's a mitzvah, you have to say again, 100 times you should tell them. Till he hits you or he curses you. Now, wait to the Rav. Let me go on with the Rav says. Only your friend, she chaveiroi, she gazboy. You know what gazboy means? Heimish. How do you say heimish in English? It's not someone I don't even know. I see him on the street and, what I mean? I had this yontiv. There was a guest in my neighborhood. He was wearing a big kippah suruga, long tzitzis, and was walking with his wife. Unbelievable pritzes, right next to my house. And every time I had a cheshik, I should just tell him, something. I kept my mouth. I don't even know who he is. Honest, no idea. Just was here for the chag.
Tell her, not him.
Yeah, I was going to tell both of them. But the Rav says, probably not going to listen to me. You think she doesn't know? Not going to listen. That's what he says. Only someone that you gasboy, that you're friendly, you have a relationship. Person in a relation is not going to. There's no way, he says. Aber ish acha shimchen isneenu. He's going to hate you. Now the Rav has a big chiddush over here, and he points it out in the bottom that in Hilchos, when he repeats this in Hilchos Yom Kippur, he does not say this. The Rav has a huge chiddush. He makes a nafkamina if he's your friend, you're close, you're not close. But it's also not very clear. He says if you're not very close to him, you shouldn't tell him because he's going to hate you. And he said, seems that right, but let's say there's a chance he might listen, so it doesn't make a difference. The Rav seems like if there's a chance someone's going to listen, you have to tell them. But if it's someone that they're not going to listen, there's only someone you're close, you could say, you should tell them. For sure he's not going to listen to it, you have to tell him. They said, if the guy's a shoygik, he doesn't know, but for sure they're not going to listen. Certain things people do, you tell them, they're surely not going to listen. No question about it. That's everyone does it, and they lives in a neighborhood out, wherever the situation, doesn't mean big, small, it's like they're not going to listen. Then mitav shishag alim zid. He's going to explain which type of averis. The Gemara talks about certain things people used to do. The Gemara says people used to over the Rebbeinu eat toises yom kippurim. The last minute of Yom Kippur they used to eat. No one says anything because they know for sure they're not going to listen. Something you know for sure you're not going to listen. We say better be a shoygig than a mezid. It says v'rabim v'lehamazidem ein lechiyosim pamachas. A kahal you have to tell him only one time. Im yedei lo shivurei nishmuna. You should just tell him once. Let's say, as a rabbi in the shul, you tell them, you got not allowed to talk about davening or whatever. Once you have to tell that to them. They should know. They have to be educated.
What if it's speaking in a shul?
Everyone knows you're not supposed to talk. It just, doesn't.
Not to keep doing it, because there's an to always.
Shulchan says Ge'arim boy. Shulchan says clearly that when Hayich Shemonester, when he repeats Shemonester, if someone talks, you have to scream at him. I don't scream. My shul I do differently. I stop the shliach tzibah. I put my hand on him. For me, it works. Works for me. Anyway, but the truth is that he's saying, generally speaking, it's something that people are not going to listen. You have to say the rabbim. You have to say once. That's it. He says. You know for sure not going to listen. They have shogig. They mamish shogig. They don't even know. You know for sure they're not going to listen. There's no reason to say. But this is very, very difficult because often I find you tell people sometimes in the public, someone does listen. I always say over a story. I was asked many, many years ago to speak in Yavna. And it was the Firestone. Remember the principal of Firestone was his name? Fireman. So I was asked, he used to daven in a shul. He asked me, I agreed, and I don't know what to talk to the eighth graders. And so I spoke to them, and I said to them, I want to tell you something. He wanted us to talk about sneers. And I told them, you'll never find the Queen of England in pants. All the pictures, you don't see her in pants. He says, do you know why? The Queen doesn't wear pants. I tried to explain to him that Abbas Yisrael is a queen. He works sneers. I was convinced, standing there, everything went into one ear and went through the other ear totally. 5 years later, I'll never forget this, I'm standing in Kmart, and it was right before Pesach. I'm buying things for my wife for Pesach. And a girl was standing there, and she turns around, are you Rabbi Tauber? Yes. Says, 5 years ago you spoke in Yavna. Since then I never wear pants and I try to be sneezestick. So as to what hit you, it hit me the picture of the Queen of England. So you see, you never know. I was convinced, honestly, the way I was talking, no one was interested. They were sitting there because they have to sit there, and I was speaking because I committed myself to speak. I remember that was the feeling I had. Never know. That's what you never when you say to a public what could happen. So he says, then he says a very interesting thing, also a big chiddush. That's the Rav's own chiddush, and he doesn't. I don't know why. It's a famous thing. He doesn't bring it down the bottom over here. This is a very famous. The Chaim talk about. The Rav has a huge chiddush. He says the Rabbi Azadin wants to say that's it. Bezdin has an obligation to stamp it out. Ava Bezdin, he says, Bezdin have an obligation to stop it. Even something is a suffix. He brings this Levine brings a very nice comparison in the bottom. But I don't know if you know this. Let me explain history. The Shulchan Harav, when he wrote the Shulchan Harav, he passed in like the Rebbein Tam. The Shkia, the Zman. Then in the Siddur, he changed. And in the Siddur he says, even though it's a suffix deraisa, But you have to tell people that you're not allowed to do melucha after the shkia. You know, he says very clearly, even it's a suffix, and even maybe, you know, it's a machik zerishonim, it's machik tanua. No. But again, he says, you know, for sure they're not going to listen. But if there's any doubt, even on a suffix iser, then maybe they're going to listen. So he doesn't bring down, there's a very famous Chivas Harivosh. The Rivosh, because it bothered me all the time. But that means, we have to print Svarim that talks about it. Moshe, the Rab over there, made a whole tumult, because he knew they're going to listen to him, this Chassidim. But let's say the Chofetz Chaim wrote a sefer on Lashon Hara. You know, till the Chofetz Chaim, Lashon Hara was, only great, high, holy person didn't speak Lashon Hara. Afterwards, today, there are lots of people who don't speak Lashon Hara. Many institutions, they teach and they talk about it. They don't speak Lashon Hara. It became much more, in the psychic of people. Before that, historians say, Lashon Hara was like someone saying, make tikkun chatzos. There's such a thing as tikkun chatzos. Certain people make tikkun chatzos, don't talk Lashon Hara. But it was so far removed from. But, there's an obligation that we should bring it down to everyone's level. But, so he holds, the Rav holds, it's a din and bezdin. The bezdin of the city is mechuyev to make sure people listen. Anything. Rabbi shogen eilen shumeloi mitu shogen al mizidem, and then came he is shein furish betoyre. Parts Abraham chsunem and usam is shos kushmoin, unless it's something not written in the Torah. There were cities in Europe, in Poland especially, some in Hungary also, but if someone was B'chal Shabbos, they would make a tumult, and they would come and bang, B'chal Shabbos. People think only Yerushalayim. This happened in Europe too. There were many cities. The Bezdin was, started B'chal Shabbos after World War I, between World War II. There were many cities who put up a big fight. Others who didn't, but because, once it starts, one guy does it, another guy does it, another guy does it, someone told me an amazing story. I know the person who said over the story. He remembers the story. His father was a Rav in Hungary. And it started in his town. There was a butcher, very successful butcher, and he became fry. And you have to in Europe, when he became fry, he spoke Yiddish. There was nothing to do. He didn't have goyish friends, and he was a mechutzev. It was Pesach. So the Rav was walking to shul, and the guy crossed him. Come, Rabbi, Rabbina, I want to show you something. He might have crossed you guys, begging him. And he knew he's a fry guy, and he shows him a sandwich. This is Pesach, bread. In the sandwich, there's chazer, and he says, Zeichel Hillel. He started Zeichel Hillel, but he's saying the Aguda. Matzah, Pesach, and it was chazer, and bread, and he was eating it, and he was laughing. While he was laughing, he started choking, and they couldn't revive him, and he died. He died on the spot. He was a young, strong guy, and there was a big levaya, and no one said a hesped from him. And they had one of the, and he was also known because he was very successful in business, so the peasants from the city came. So one guy, no one wanted to speak to the levaya, so one guy got up, and he spoke that he was a nice man, and he helped other people in business. And then it was said, but in the Hungarians have the hesped, it says, and he should be a melitz yosher for everyone. Melitz yosher mean? Let him come, and I say melitz yosher in English, and he should come to heaven and say good things for us, make sure that we are successful. Tzadi goes up, he says he should be a melitz yosher. Melitz means a good advocate. Melitz is a lawyer, a good guy. And the whole place burst out laughing. And you know what happened afterwards? Since this whole person burst out laughing, and he died, there were few not from guys, and they all back became from. Amazing story. Right before the war this happened. So it's this guy who was a Russia, who died choking on Chometz and Chaza. You know what I mean? But through him, a Kiddush Hashem happened. Get him. The Thrim came out that people. But Al Kapunim, you see that there has to be, Rabbanim have to speak up, trying to convince people to do the right thing. Just like Chabad makes sure people puts on film, just like you make sure people have mezuzah. We are obligated to make sure people keep kosher and kashrus, people keep the mikveh. Maybe, we don't have to rebuke them and call them a sinner, but just encourage them. This is the right thing to do. The right thing is to keep kosher, daven, sneeze, that's our obligation. Then he says a very, very important halacha. Kol ha-mechiach es chaveroi. Bein dvurim shebeini beinoi. It doesn't make it. It says Musa. Bein dvurim shebeini lebeini mukam. That means he says to a person, he rebukes him. You hurt someone. You eat chazer. He says, tzurich lechichoi beinoi lebein atzmoi. On between you and him. Veidabeloi benachas. This is what the Rav says, the solution of Rambam. You should tell him nicely. That means if you see someone that's sinning, you have to tell him in a loving way. The rule is, if a person, you tell a person in a sharp way, he's not interested. You know that? Let me tell you how I see this. Every person thinks that he does exactly what Hashem wants from him. My wife pointed this out to me. There was this guy who in Ohio who kidnapped 3 girls. I forgot the name, whatever his name was. And when he was put on the stand, the first thing he said, "I'm not a monster," because you got to live with yourself. Boy, he was a monster of the monsters. He was a mega monster. But the first thing he has to get, you got to live with yourself. Everyone thinks what they do is exactly what Hashem says. The ones on the right, they're from, that's not the one on the left, they missing the boat. I'm in the middle of the road. I always tell people, see now we have a very wide middle of the road. Extremely, everyone thinks in the middle of the road. No one likes to feel that I'm doing something wrong. So when you point out something is chasaron, it's extremely painful. So the Rambam says the only way you could help someone is we talk to him nicely. There's a famous story with the Hilchos Chaim. His son brings this story. The Hilchos Chaim, how's it called? The Russians know this. There was Konstantin, how was it called? The Konstantin, they were drafted in the army for 25 years. How do you call it in English? Kandanisten. So the Hilchos Chaim was traveling and he came to a Kretschmer, is an inn. And he came in, and he sees this Jewish guy. He doesn't wash. He sits down. So Hilchos Chaim gets up, and he wants to tell him, you have to wash for bread. You don't sit down. Guy says, Rebbe, this guy, you're going to tell him to wash for bread? They were totally not religious. Hilchos Chaim walks over him. He had no idea this was the Hilchos Chaim. Shakes his hand. He starts crying. And the guy got nervous. So an old man is crying. So why, what happened? He says, you are going to have more olam haba than me. Because if you're going to do tshuva now, and you're going to wash and become a Jew, you're going to be a tzaddik. I can't have such olam haba. That's all he told him. The guy was so moved that he met his son later. He moved, so he went. Anyways, he became frum. Those days people never get married, but after 25 years he came out of the thing and he met his son. He told him that he became frum. That one conversation, he didn't tell him anything. He just started crying. Because the Hilchos Chaim I once saw from the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that why was the Hilchos Chaim Zoicha, the Mishtabir, to be so accepted? I once asked the Moiches Sforim in New York many years, what is the bestseller? You know what the bestseller in the Sforim is? The Mishnah Berurah.
What?
Mishnah Berurah. Tell me, the bestseller, all Sforim in the whole world, is the Mishnah Berurah. No matter how much they print, people keep on buying mitzvah presents, the Mishnah Berurah. So I once saw in Rabbi Shem one of the sikhs, how's it called, the Malka, whatever it's. I once saw once inside. He says that he once said because he had such a havas he saw. That's why he made the Hilchos Chaim, havas chesed. Some people, he had such a havas he saw. That's why his sefer is unbelievable. It was accepted like Toras Moshe, in the sefer. But upon him, the Rambam, the solution that Harav brings the Rambam to rebuke someone because no one likes to feel they're wrong. None of us. No one would like when you point out something that you did something wrong, we become defensive, like who knows what. That's the nature of people. So, the Rambam says you have to say a nice way. The Hilchos Chaim said it in a way, it was amazing. The guy did tshuva. So he says, and he assaulted him, when you say rebuke and you embarrassed him, so the lav of sisa ul chet is when even you tell him, make sure you don't insult him, hurt his feeling. Don't carry chet. This is the place where you learn you're not allowed to insult someone. I always say over the story that I was 9 years old, and I always tell these people, when you look back in your youth, what do you remember? A young boy fighting, what do you remember? The physical fight you were fighting with someone, or someone insulted you, but I remember as a what's his name? As a child, I was very tall for my age, and the guy came and took away the coat. Chutzpah, and he was 2 years older, and I beat him up. So he didn't know what to say, so he insulted me, but I don't remember the fight. We punched each other. I don't remember he insulted me, but if you look back in your life, what you remember, which pain you remember the most, is an insult. Not that you punched someone punched you, and if you look back, you notice that's because busha is the most painful thing. That's why the Torah. What do you say? Not barabim.
Same thing.
The same thing. Barabim is ein chedik alam haba, but not barabim. You're not allowed to hurt someone's feeling. It's a frightening thing. That's why when someone, where we learn boishes minat Torah, you're not allowed to insult someone. See, there's two psukim. The Torah says, you're not allowed to embarrass someone. Then the Torah says about paying. The Torah talks about the chziki b'mevushav. The Torah, where the two people are fighting, and the wife of the one of them grabs the other and sneezes the place, and insulted him. She has to pay for the insult, because that's an insult. But the Torah, where do you see you're not allowed to hurt someone's feeling, is from this lav. It's a lav in the Torah. So anytime, doesn't make a difference how you hurt someone. Some people have asked me from the last few years, where do you see in the Torah that a molester says, Echzikim Avushav, is that where the Torah says, the Torah says, you're not allowed to insult someone. It doesn't make a difference how you insulted him, if you screamed at him or you took advantage of a child, of a girl. Okay. Don't call him a name that is embarrassed. Don't say in front of him something that he's embarrassed of. Wow. It's really frightening. When you insult someone, you know why? Because it's the most painful thing in the world. Many years ago, someone showed me an article, many years ago, where this professor, you should hear this, a professor wrote this herself, that she was raped as a 19-year-old girl, going to college. She became a professor later, and years later, someone made a bilbil, I say bilbil, how do you say in English? False allegations that her work was plagiarized, you say in English? It turned out it wasn't true, but till they proved that it wasn't true, it was his own work, he says it was worse than being raped. I was shocked when the guy told it to me. Being raped is not a terrible thing, happened, the boyfriend raped her, and whatever. But here, it was in all the papers, it's plagiarized, and it turned out to be true later. That was unbelievably more painful. So we don't rape is terrible, but you see, to embarrass someone in public is the worst thing you can do. The Gemara says, the Rambam says you don't have to be meichel him even. You know that? The Ramah brings down the Yishalma. You don't have to forgive him.
You don't.
You don't. You don't have to. It's nice to forgive him. There's a very famous story with one of the Rebbes. I forgot which Rebbe. Someone insulted him, made a lie about him. And he asked him, came to him to ask forgiveness. And he says, come to me, Motzei Shabbos. Came out to Shabbos, tells him, bring me the 2 pillows that you own. So he went back home, got his 2 pillows. He says, come to the backyard. He tells him to cut the 2 pillows in half. And all the feathers went flying. He says, when you gather all the feathers, I'll be meichel. So the Arab says, why is this? He says, you said a lie me, so the lie went into everyone's mind. You're able to take out all the lies from everyone's mind, I'll be meichel. See, when you sold someone barabim, there's certain things that people look at it, okay, certain insult barabim, where you got up in the middle of a shul and you screamed at someone, it's mal b'neichai, but no, people know these guys are hothead. Sometimes, even though you insult someone, but you know, it's terrible feeling, guy gets up and screams at you, but you know, this guy's a hothead. You know, this guy's, they say, no one takes it serious. But a guy makes up a story, that's like, now go disprove it. You know what I mean? Okay, it's really frightening. This is young people have to know this. Like, Baruch Hashem, I want to tell you something. I know the television is a terrible thing, but one of the reasons it's less happening, the people busy with all the sports. If you live in it, if you can't watch television, there's no sports, you got to do something with your life. You got to fight with someone. All due respect, that's why I say in Monroe there's so much fighting going on. Because, they have no distraction. Like this, we have a distraction, not me. Some of you, this team won, this team lost, it's my Lakers or my Clippers or whatever. I love when people say it's my team. You ever notice? It's my team who won. But you have other venues to let your frustration out. People like a good fight. But imagine you play a game and no one wins. I watched the Super Bowl. I didn't watch it all. I noticed that after the Super Bowl, people were disappointed. So why is that? It wasn't a good game. It was a waste. I don't know who played who, but it wasn't a good fight. You wanted a good fight. People like a good fight. Not me. Let them fight it out on the field and beat each other up. Not me. That's good. That's why, that's Malbim Pnei Chaveda. But now the Baruch Hashem, it's not so common. I'm sure in this neighborhood too. It's not. I noticed as growing up, it was terrible. I was growing up. The old generation would fight. I used to think it was Holocaust survivors. No, because people need a place to vent. Okay. So then the Rabbi brings down Lushan Rambam. Med wurden wir mir mit wohnen Sheben Nuden Chaveiroi. This is all Ben Nuden Chaveiroi. Aber the word Shemayim in lo Chuzeboy Tzurich lo Yichichoi Barabim Ad Shiyachze LeMitev Kmo Shiusi Kolavim BeYisrael. He says it's only Ben Nuden Chaveiroi. If a guy does Aveda, the Bezdin or the Nuvi has to get up and make you feel horrible. See, the Nevi'im, I always tell this to people, the Nevi'im were no Rebbes. They didn't mince words. Anyone learns Novi, the Nevi'im didn't mince words. He says, you guys are going to go to hell. I mean, any Novi you learn. Yirmiyah, Yeshaya, there's going to be a terrible destruction. If you go follow this way, Mismigdash is going to be Harav, and you won't have what to eat, and you'll be walking barefoot. And the Novi didn't mince words. He tried to get people to do tshuva, but unfortunately, it didn't help. The Mismigdash was Harav. It didn't help. Okay, he says, if you see a person doing Avei right now, you have to stop him. You have to stop him. It's really that you see it, but when a person, I tell you what happened. I was standing at a wedding, and this guy, who's supposed to be from, used to keep Shabbos, introduces me to his girlfriend. I was told that his girlfriend is not Jewish. Dating someone, and you could tell she's not Jewish. She's Oriental girl, and I say to him, "Is she? As a rabbi, I was caught off guard. Is she Jewish?" So he says, "No, she's becoming Gioris." He says, "Where does she live?" "She lives in my house." I says, "That's a horrible sin. You have to tell him. If a guy doesn't tell you what he's doing, you know about it, and he'll say, coming to introduces me to her. I mean, you have to. That's what the Rabbi says. It's a chilul Hashem. You don't say. He has to know that he's wrong.
In that case, though, remember you were talking about the case where somebody doesn't know. In such a case, they obviously already know.
But at the moment, he shouldn't think that I am. How do you say in English?
That's what he's
what?
doing by telling him. That's right. So you're,
I say this in
you're actually
condoning.
supposed to hurt someone.
So that's the word I was looking for. It's like he was telling me that I should condone it, that it's okay. Why was he telling this to me? He should be embarrassed. It happened to be we're standing by a wedding together, but you know.
Which is the. So my point is that in this case, you're actually supposed to hurt somebody.
Yeah. I told him, how you living with her? She's not Jewish yet. Living on the. I asked him, you play chess every night with her? I go. I asked him, what do you do? Yeah, I mean, see, let me explain. When he tells me something, that means I represent as a rabbi. If I don't say anything, then it's like they were condoning. It's like it's okay. That's if I haven't heard about it. I just ignored it and I never said anything. As long but when it comes introduces it to me, then I have to say what I have to say. All right. See, I want to tell you something very, very frightening. The Hilchos Chaim used to get up when he used to rebuke the people who started to cry. Do you know why? He said like this: I am your guarantor. You know what a guarantor means? That means in the next world, they're going to ask you why this Reuven, why he didn't do this and do this. So the Hilchos Chaim says, they're going to ask me, you're the guarantor. No. You have to pay. He can't pay, you pay. We are each other's guarantors. Kol Yisrael Revim zelazeh. You know what Revim means? We're all guarantors to each other. It's a terrible feeling. It's an incredible burden to think about that way. But that's why we have to try. I mean, that's what Lubavitch was all about, get people to become frum. And that's one of the greatest mitzvahs which to do. The greatest mitzvah is to get someone to become religious. Or get someone who's not really back to religion. The Zohar Kodesh says there's nothing more greater than that. You know that? It's very interesting. The Zohar says greatest mitzvah the Zohar says is to get non-religious people to become religious. The Zohar says. Yeah, no, I mean,
of course, you would have to.
Yeah, but it's an amazing thing. It's not just, but it's one of the hardest things. We could bring people to a certain point. It's the hardest thing to tell people. No, because who wants to change? Once we get into a routine, who wants to change?
What's the last one in the Zohar?
What do you say?
What's the last one?
The Zohar is in Pashas Yisroi. The Zohar says that, I forgot the Lushan, the Zohar says by Yisroi, the Zohar says when a person gets someone to frum, it's like, Ati Gedalto Mi'oid, the Rebbeinu Shem's name gets exalted the greatest. When someone not religious, we recognizes him, becomes a religious solution. Okay. Talmud Shiroi Rabbi Oiver Havere Oimer Martenim in Kaf Kach Laskir Ili Shoigigi Enu Shmeilo Ili Cheni Oid. You have to tell your Rabbi, this is a kasha on the Chassidim. Chassidim believe that the Rebbe never makes a mistake. Never. Yeah, well. So the Gemara says Rabbi. Rabbi was a big Rebbe. Rabbi Bar Nachmani, I want to tell you, he was 40 years old when he died. And the Gemara says, he yatsa neshmosa, but famous guy, how Rabbeinu Kudish, Rabbi Bar Nachmani died. How? Let me tell you how the Gemara says he died. The Gemara says there was a machlokes in heaven between Hashem and the Mesifta Derekia. A big machlokes. And Hilchos Tzaras. Beheaders come out, I want to go into Hilchos Tzaras. So they asked Rabbi Nachmeni, he said, Tuoid v'yotze neshmusa b'tahara. So Abaya, although we just had it in Gemara before, we had Abaya in Beya. Abaya asked his Rebbe, what are you doing? A few times. But again, so the Gemara, this is a Gemara, nothing the Rav. This is Gemara says that if you see a Rebbe, you should ask him. Didn't you teach us so and so? Well, you have to ask. You're obligated to ask. Okay. Chai Vudam, this is a very, very, very frightening lav. Chai Vudam Lizer b'yisoymen v'almunes efilam hashirim gedoylem. I spoke to friends. I have a friend when I was young. We grew up together. He was a Yosem. He said, you should know, because he was a Yosem, he was so sensitive. He was so painful. People who, he lost his mother. And I think his mother died when he was in childbirth. So he never had a mother. I think his father remarried when he was about 3-4 years old. And now she didn't treat him like a mother. But it's extremely painful. So you're not allowed to, there's a lav in the Torah. Special lav, do not hurt a Yosem and Almana. Almana is a widow.
And a Yosem is what?
Yosem is a Yatom. I say orphan. Because the truth is, they are very, very hurt. A Yosem and Almana from life experiences. So Yosem is, when he said in a minute, Solution Rambam he says, this is the Chiddush. My brother had a classmate, he was a Yosem, and his mother made it very rich. Because she had to go to work. We were growing up, many people, wives didn't work. She had to go to work, and she started a business. She became very wealthy. He said that meant nothing. I missed a father terrible. He explained it to me years later. It doesn't help, just because you have all the money. The child needs a father. He says, he teases them, or he gets them agitated, or hurt the feelings, or ruda means he chastised them, or special oisisa. He says, Shenemar kalamuna ve'yusar. You know what it says in the Torah? If you do pain them and they're going to scream to them, I listen very quickly. Kishmati gechonani. The Gemara says, when you hurt a Yosan Almuna and they give a sigh, you are in major trouble. The Medrash says that the sigh of a Yosan Almuna is more than the scream of a Malach. It's the Kolchkin, Amaka Oisam, Amikalalon. It doesn't make it. If you hurt the feelings of Yosem Med, what am I meaning? Bizman she'ini Oisam etzorich atzmam. You don't mean their own good. Ave ini Oisam Rabbi k'dei lil mit Torah, to learn Torah. It disciplines them. Or Ibnis, you're obligated to teach someone a profession. And you get the child, you should learn a profession. He says, Oy lalicha mederech yishura, to go heizemitter. Afi biken, even though you do the Shem Shemayim, la yinag by mini kol udam. Don't eliyasanem hefresh, b'yinam benachas, calmly, barachmim gedoylem. Rambam says, the Shulchan Rambam, you should show that they're different. Yosam Echad Yosam Av, it doesn't make a difference, Yosam Av Em, but Emusan Yikri Yisoyman, your question, Daniel. So when are they called Yisoyman? He says, they don't need anyone to rely on, to raise them on the top of him. I had someone who told me, this is very interesting. I asked him this question. He lost his father with a young child, and he's doing well. He had a good job. And I noticed that he gets very sensitive. I asked him, you're 40 years old. I asked him, and are you still, so I am still in pain. But at Halacha, he doesn't have a yosem, even though he's so sensitive. He's a grown man. He has a house of children, and don't want to,
And does it matter one parent, two parents?
Says either the father or the mother. Doesn't make a difference.
That was my question.
Doesn't make. He says either Yosem Av, Yosem Em.
My father, when he lost his father, my father was in his 60s in business. He used to cry to people from the orphan.
Look, I lost my father 10 years ago. I mean, I was very close to my father. I was a special father, but yeah, it's, if you're close to your father, it's a terrible loss. Yeah, but we can't call it. It's a joke. I'm going to tell you what the Rabbi is saying. The old Yiddish people would say, at 60, ich ben a Yusim. I'm a Avram, the age of 60. Okay. But the truth is that with children who are Yisayimim, it's very, very painful. As teachers among the schools, they're so sensitive. So I asked someone who grew up without his father, not because he Yisayim. The parents got divorced and his father was not involved. He says, it wasn't so painful. I don't know the statistics. I have no idea. It bothered me. I have this question. Always bothered me. So does that child or losing a father is a worse child? No.
Maybe a lot of the is worse because he knows his dad is there, but his dad is not helping.
Yeah, but I asked him. Again.
No, not worse. Meaning, do they require special treatment?
I watched this for years, wanted to figure this out, and my observation is they don't have that pain as they really are. Some.
It's not pain, but
They feel agitated, they're angry. I ask Machanchen, they would tell you right away. You come into a class, they could tell which children come from broken homes immediately. The teachers tell me they could. Yeah, but not because they misbehave and they're not disciplined and they're what? They act out the anger. But the Yisayimim don't act up the anger. They cry quickly. They get insulted quickly. Yeah, we live in a difficult society. That's for sure. Now comes if we could start this Lushan Harav. Now comes a lav in the Torah, which is called L'seilach ruchel ba'amechel, which means to gossip. And ruchel means not just gossip. Ruchel means I come to you and I said, you know what he said about you? Ruchel is a peddler. And the Lushan Torah, Ruchel is a guy who goes from city to city peddling his things. So the Torah calls it, he goes from one person and he carries, that people love to do that. We all know in society that people just love, get people, it's called Machar Chariv, Shlomo Melech calls it. So he brings from one, so the Gemara says, where do you see the worst Rechilis? You shul. What's the name? Doeg came. You know what Doeg was? Doeg was together with Shaul. So Doeg came and told Shaul that David the Melech was being fed by Achimelech. Achimelech was the Kohen Gadol of Noiv Ira Kahanim. There was a city called Noiv Ira Kahanim. Let me just explain the story quickly. David the Melech, he killed Goliath. David the Melech. David the Melech became the general, and Shaul wanted to kill him because he became so popular, and he thought this is the king, and he ran away from Shaul, and he ran, and he passed the city of Noiv, and he didn't have what to eat. He asked the Kahanim to give him bread. He gave him bread, and he gave him also the spear that was being stored there from Goliath. And Doeg saw this, told this to Shaul, and Shaul accepted the Lashon Hara, and he said to wipe out the city of of Noiv. So the Gemara says, I'm a Kabul Lashon Hara, Doeg said Lashon Hara, Shaul accepted Lashon Hara, and that caused that the entire city of Noiv was murdered. And it wasn't even true, because Achimelech said, it wasn't like nowadays, from the internet, the news, the inside politics of the palace. And he said, I had no idea that you guys don't get along, that you want to kill him. He didn't accept his word, and Noiv Ira Kahanim died. So when it says, if a guy's a ruchel, 3 people get killed. Doeg lost his olam haba. Shul died a horrific death, and that was the Oynish, and Noivei Kahanim was wiped out. And the Gemara says, Avner, Avner was murdered. Yoav murdered Avner. You know Nach a little bit? Avner, right. Avner was the general of what's his name? Of Shul. And Yoav was the general of David. And when Shul fell, so Avner decided he'll bring his army to David the Melech. Yoav didn't trust him, and he was nervous for his position. And he had a trick, and he killed him. You know how he killed him? When it says they got together, and he asks him, how do you do chalitza if you don't have hands? So you do it with your mouth. How could you with your mouth? I'll show you. Bend down. Bend down, he stabbed him. So Gemara says, you know what the Medrash says? Avnei got up. He had a spear through and through, grabbed Yoav, and he was choking him to death. And so they all begged him, if you're going to choke him, you're dying. You're going to kill him. Who's going to fight the Pelishtim? So the Medrash says he opened his arms. So the Medrash says the Gevura, I say Gevura in English, the strength of opening your arms was more than all the battles Avner did. Because he's self-disciplined. He could have killed him right then. And he had a right to kill him. He's the best Goyal Adam. You see him? He opened his heart. So they went to ask the question, why was Avnei murdered? So why was Avnei murdered? Yoav killed him. No one dies if it's not Bashir. So the Gemara says, you know why Avnei died such a horrific death? Because he could have stopped Shul from killing Noiviri Kahana. So Doeg lost his Olam Haba. Shul died in a horrific death. And Noiv got killed out. And here Avnei died, was also murdered because of this. So you see how horrible, Rechilis is. Rechilis means, so there's two lavin. There's a lavin, Seilech Ruchel Ba'Mechel. The second, not to believe. You should remember that I always watch this, how people say things so not accurate.
So it's a halacha for us not to believe.
Not to believe, but you have to take it, maybe it's true, but don't accept it. If someone says, I just had a phone call. Someone of the Chabad houses called me up the rabbi. They say this guy's a molester. What should he do? I said to him, you have, maybe it's true. You got to check it out. You can't say it doesn't make sense. He's an educated man, whatever. Maybe it's true. That's called, you can't be foolish. Maybe it's true. You have to protect the children. But you can't accept it as a grain of stone. See, most people like to believe bad about other people. Hilchos Chaim gives a mushal. A guy comes and he says to you a nice Shulchan Hara, and you believe, he says, the guy wouldn't make up the story. So Hilchos Chaim says, what happens if he comes to you and asks you a loan for $10,000? Oh, $10,000. You need a loan? I don't know. You have business? What happened? A minute ago you said, he wouldn't make up the story. Comes to your pocket, I don't know if I could trust him. Because the truth is, many people, when you say over story, I see this all the time in life. I had someone call me up with a shalach mishpat, and I knew he's not telling me one part of the story. I says, what, you're telling me, but I'm sure there's another part of the story. And lo and behold, the next day, the other guy calls me up, and I knew there was something missing in the story. So I was careful when people ask me, he says, I'm sure there's another part of the story, But people change and add and jump to conclusions and make up stories, and so that's why you're not allowed to believe.
Can you help that? You can say you don't believe, you try to mean it, but can you really not believe?
Yeah, it's often you take things with a grain of salt, and you see it's not true. Often people say Lashon Hara about someone, and it turns out I said it in Toiris. So what people say on the streets, often in Din Torah, it's the opposite. Just had a Din Torah husband and wife. Okay? And what they said on the streets, and it was literally the opposite. It wasn't his story, her story. When the story came out very clearly, what he did, what she did, we're talking about not shalom bayis, monetary things, an investment went sour. Clearly the opposite of what people said on the street. People are not careful what they heard exactly to repeat it. I'm blessed with a good memory. I see when people say over news items, they're so inaccurate. I just listen to the headlines. But I have a memory and I remember details. I watch people say over stories. It wasn't this, it wasn't that, add a little bit. People are not, that's why you can't believe stories. And if a guy speaks Lashon Hara, maybe he's lying. People like to embellish the story. You ever notice people like when they say over a story, add a little bit? What do you say? Big megazim, that it's this and it was that, and people are that way. All right, we'll stop over here, Rabbi.